Welcome to the second last day of FreightWeekSTL 2023. I'm Mary Lamy, Executive Vice President of Multimodal Enterprises for Bi-State Development, which includes the St. Louis Regional Freightway as one of its enterprises. Yesterday marked a highlight of FreightWeekSTL as we hosted our in-person Freight Summit, the first one since 2019. We featured the release of the 2024 Priority Projects List, a valuable tool used to advocate for support and funding for critical infrastructure improvements, with related remarks by representatives of both the Missouri and the Illinois Departments of Transportation. The event also included a keynote address spotlighting the East Coast's largest container import gateway, the Port of New York and New Jersey, while highlighting its rail connectivity to the St. Louis region. We now plan to take a closer look at how low water levels and flood conditions have disrupted operations on the Missouri and Mississippi rivers in recent years, and how those involved in creating the plans and policies to keep river traffic moving have found new ways to partner and collaborate to strengthen the resiliency of the rivers for navigation. We'll learn about how they're working together, what the agricultural community does when the waterways aren't available for transportation, and the role of both dredging and communications. Before we dive into our topic, we'd like to thank our sponsors. This year's presenting sponsors include the Boeing Center, Washington University, Steadfast City, St. Louis, University of Missouri, St. Louis, Millstone Weber, and Ameren. Our supporting sponsors are the Jerry Costello Group and the Hauser Group. Associate sponsors for this year include Southern Illinois Builders Association, Terracon, Alberici, Castle Contracting, HNTB, CDI, and Brinkman Constructors. We appreciate all of the support that makes it possible for us to deliver Freight Week STL. I'll be moderating today's session, and our panelists include Cheryl Ball, the Waterways and Freight Administrator with Missouri Department of Transportation, Chris Klinklin, Deputy Director with the Missouri Department of Agriculture, Lou Delarco, Chief Operations Division with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and Shane Kinney, Executive Director with the Coalition to Protect the Missouri River. Welcome, everyone, and we're going to start with asking each of you to introduce yourself and your organization. Cheryl, let's begin with you. Give us a little information on your background and your current role with the Missouri Department of Transportation.
Thanks, Mary. I've been with the Department of Transportation for about 35 years and spent most of that in rewarding positions that were looking at how to collaboratively solve problems. And I joined our water and freight team in 2012. And the focus of that group is looking at what are the things that are happening in Missouri that are causing our freight not to flow most efficiently, because we know that freight flowing is what drives our economy. So what are we doing that's helping our economy? And through that, I work with freight stakeholders, such as the navigators, the ports, the trucking industry, federal agencies, and other state agencies. And we all look at that as collaborative problem solving and try to find ways to fix that along the way.
Okay, Chris, you're up next to tell us about you and your role with Missouri Department of Agriculture.
My name is Chris Klinklin. I'm the Deputy Director at the Missouri Department of Agriculture. I've been with the department over 30 years. Most of my early part of my career was spent in the grain arena. In that area, I learned to work quite closely with a lot of our barge loading facilities. I also managed all the grain inspection work, all the federal grain inspection work for the department. So we work closely with both rail, freight, getting grain moved out of the state. Obviously, in the state of Missouri, with two major rivers, transportation is always a great opportunity, but it also comes with a lot of headaches. We deal with both floods and droughts, and in my role as Deputy Director here at the department, I get the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of other state agencies on how we react to those and what we do to help our farmers and agribusinesses get their grain moved or get their fertilizer moved upriver.
Okay, Lou, now it's your turn to introduce yourself and tell us about the specific areas of the Corps of Engineers that are your focus.
My name is Lou Delarco, and I'm the Chief of Operations for the St. Louis District Corps of Engineers. I've been in my current role for about 12 years and have spent 35 years with the agency. In my current role as the Chief of Operations, I oversee operations and maintenance of 4 locks on the Mississippi River, from Lock 24 in Clarksville to Locks 27 in Granite City, as well as 180 miles of open river from St. Louis to Cairo. Corps of Engineers is responsible for maintaining the congressionally authorized channel dimensions of 9 feet of depth and 300 feet of width on the 300 miles of the Middle Mississippi River from Saverton, Missouri to Cairo, Illinois. Channel in this area is primarily maintained by dredging, which is a function of running a channel survey, identifying areas of concern, and defining the area to be removed by dredging. St. Louis District dredge is the dredge potter. It's called the dustpan dredge, as it sucks up sand and sediment like a vacuum cleaner and deposits it via a pipeline outside of the channel. We utilize dredging to provide safe, efficient, and reliable movement to keep commerce flowing on the Mississippi River in support of the nation's economy. Over 500 million tons, half of all U.S. grain exports, transit the Mississippi River annually. A typical dredging season runs 24/7 from July through December, longer during periods of prolonged low water. We accomplish the dredging mission via a diverse team that consists of Corps, United States Coast Guard, river industry, and contractors, all providing inputs, surveys, feedback, and actions to inform shippers of channel conditions in order for them to make sound business decisions with respect to shipping on the Mississippi River.
Okay, and finally, Shane, give us a little bit about your background and let's get our audience up to speed on the role of the Coalition to Protect the Missouri River.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, my name is Shane Kinney, and I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition to Protect the Missouri River. And we're a group that represents a broad cross-section of industry that live and work on the Missouri River. And so that ranges from our agricultural groups like Missouri Corn, Missouri Soybean, and those other partner groups across the states of Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas, as well as the dredging community, shippers, navigators, and ports, and really anyone who lives, works, uses the Missouri River from a industry standpoint, and that includes drinking water and energy production as well. And so we were formed in 2001 to really coalesce the voices around the Missouri River who are impacted by policy decisions, how the Missouri River is managed, to make sure we can have a more positive impact and one voice as we manage the river for our state and our region. And so like I said, we're established in 2001 and we've grown regionally since then. And so we work across that section. My background comes from the policy standpoint, the government policy standpoint, starting with really the flood of 2011 is where I got to work on Missouri River issues. And so unexpectedly, that's the direction my career took. And it's been good to be with the Coalition to Protect the Missouri River to expand on that role. And as I work with industry to advocate for the use of the river.
Thank you, Shane. Okay, we're going to kick things off with you, Cheryl. Tell us about the role MoDOT is playing in addressing drought and resiliency issues on the inland waterways and how partnerships and collaboration and communication are central to their success.
Well, the Missouri has a drought action plan, and it is housed on the Department of Natural Resources website. And what it is a coalition of state agencies that come together and say, if there's a drought happening, or in case there's a flood happening, what are the things that are impacting our Missouri citizens, and what are things that the state can or should be doing? One of the major accomplishments of that Drought Action Committee is that they are looking at each other so that we're not relying in silos within those agencies, and you look outside. Within that, as we looked at the drought that affected us for the last few years, one of those opportunities is they could pull up an impact teams. And those are really like subcommittees that say, what is happening? What is happening to Missourians? What is this particular flood or drought causing? And what is it we need to do and how to happen? So they reached out to MoDOT and said, can you please pull together a drought action commercial navigation impact team? And what we did was we pulled in many of the stakeholders, such as the folks on this call, in addition to other navigators. We talked to the port agencies, the Coast Guard, the Corps of Engineers, the National Weather Service, and said, coming together, what are the things that are impacting you most because of the drought? And we looked at that to say, are there anything that we can do either as a group or as state to help minimize those impacts to Missourians and get that freight flowing and get things happening. So that's what happened and how the Commercial Navigation Impact Team got pulled together. What we really saw is we met once a month and came together and said, let's get updates from the Corps, because one of the things that we wanted to make sure the navigators and the ports and others had information. What is the best information source that we can give you? Because if you can plan ahead, you can look at how things are happening and maybe make alternative plans. That's one of the reasons MoDOT was most interested in it, because if it can't move on the river, it's got to move in another place. So it's either going to go to rail, it's going to go to trucking. And both of those modes have quite a bit of congestion going on right now. So adding those additional vehicles onto those modes would cause even worse difficulties. So we want to keep it on the river to the best of our abilities. So when we pulled this group together and discussed those items, what we found was a couple of root cause issues. And so we are now working towards remedying those within agencies, and we brought stakeholders in as we need to be.
Alrighty, thank you, Cheryl. Lou, keen on Cheryl's comments, what can you tell us about the role of the Corps of Engineers in these efforts and the proactive approach you took?
Early on in the dredging season, we noticed that the hydrograph for St. Louis was closely mirroring that of 2012, the last time we had a significant drought in our area of responsibility. At that time, the focus was on the removal of the rock pinnacles in Thebes, south of Cape Girardeau. This time, the focus was on the shoaling from St. Louis to Cairo due to the lower river levels. To that end, in September, we began to implement lessons learned from that time frame. Lessons which would enable efficient dredging and keep the channel open and at authorized dimensions given the forecast. Those consisted of managing releases from our reservoirs and locks and dams, along with strategically bringing in more Corps of Engineers and contract dredges ahead of critical times throughout our season where low water was persistent. In all, 5 dredges were utilized at various time frames. 4 were Corps owned. From St. Louis, the dredge Potter, St. Paul, Minnesota, dredge Getz, Memphis, Tennessee, dredge Hurley, and Vicksburg, Mississippi, the dredge Jadwin, as well as 1 contractor-owned dredge, the Bill Holman out of Illinois. At one time, we had 4 dredges working in our primary area of concern, the open river portion from St. Louis to Cairo, to keep commerce flowing. This was critical as in October, we broke 10 records for daily loads in St. Louis. These dredges were all operating 24/7. They addressed 70 separate locations throughout the season to prevent channel closures and moved over 10 million cubic yards, well over the 4 million cubic yards moved in a normal dredging season. For instance, our dustpan dredges are able to fill up an Olympic-sized swimming pool every hour when in full production. The Mississippi River water levels finally started to rise, and the mission was called complete for February 2023. Now we face a shortened off-season to conduct routine maintenance and critical upgrades to our government dredge fleet, most of which are 90-plus-year-old vessels. The leadership of all the dredges deserve the credit for maintaining their vessels throughout the harsh winter and prolonged season. I'm happy to report that we're finishing our local maintenance and expect to be ready to dredge this July or sooner if need be.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Shane, what can you tell us about the current river conditions and what's happened recently to improve movement on the waterways?
Yeah, so despite some recent low runoff years, I think it is important to note that these are really very exciting times for navigation on the Missouri River. Just recently, the most recent numbers, which are from 2020, show that over 5.4 million tons was moving on the Missouri River, which is a significant increase over 2019's number of about 3.9 million tons. And that's a mix of sand and gravel being the largest piece, but in addition, fertilizer, petroleum products, grains, and a lot of other things as well. And so As we know, as Lou mentioned, it was a low water year last year and the previous year as well, based on runoff in the upper basin from the Missouri River. However, in late 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which many folks are aware of, that sent funding in a lot of different directions, it actually allocated about $249 million specifically to the Missouri River Bank Stabilization and Navigation Project to repair and make improvements to the Missouri River navigation channel. And so that investment, along with some previous repairs, is having a pretty significant impact on the reliability of the channel. And as Cheryl mentioned, reliability and resiliency for our transportation network is key, because being able to depend on it and have options to move products and freight is really important. So we've seen a significant impact on that reliability because of that investment. And I think even last year, several ports and pilots on the river who work on it every day have indicated that thanks to this work and the continued work that's happening, they were able to continue to move freight products last summer, and when in previous dry years of this nature, they probably wouldn't have. And so I think that just tells the story of the importance of this investment, but that this investment is having an impact in the reliability of the channel and the river in low runoff years, which is really important. And so, as I mentioned, we know resiliency is key to our transportation network. So this is good to hear that those investments paid off, and a lot of those dollars haven't even hit the ground yet. And so we're going to see more of that impact as we move into this year as well. Some other good news is there was an increased snowpack in the upper Missouri River Basin this winter, and that's starting to come off now. And because of that, we are starting to see some recovery in the amount of water in the reservoirs. And so it's going to take multiple years of good snowpack to fully recover, but we're already seeing good outlook from the Corps of Engineers on this navigation season because of that. And so a lot of good news when it comes to resiliency and reliability of the system through a drought based on the investments that have happened over the last several years.
That's fantastic. Chris, tell us how your organization fits into this collaborative initiative.
Well, as a cabinet agency, one of many cabinet agencies that are assigned to the Drought Task Force, we work with all the ag organizations, and we usually try to get all the commodity groups, USDA, work with our federal partners, work with all the partners to try to get everybody in one room to figure out what's going on. Another big important part that we play is communicating with our farmers and making sure that they are filing reports with the Drought Assessment Center, so that the drought maps, which actually drive a lot of federal assistance to the farmers, are accurate. You don't call me and tell me how dry it is. Send some pictures into the Drought Committee so they can take a look at that. And that's real important to getting funds out to our producers. We're also in the middle of a drought. We're also worried about just taking care of basic needs, livestock water. We may be working with other cabinet agencies to determine if there's lakes that we can access to help provide water to our livestock industry in the state. It all really kind of depends on the time of the year when the drought hits. This last year's drought, we'd already got a crop planted, and it was a little later in the growing season. Depending on what time of the season it is kind of how we have to react. But the key is getting all the partners together to determine what's the best reaction, and work with the governor's office, work with with all the cabinet agencies to get a response that farmers can use.
Thanks, Chris. Lou, you've given us a great overview of the tactical steps the Corps took to keep the river flowing, but you also played a key role in keeping the communication flowing during this time. Tell us about that.
That was another lesson learned from the past. We published the Corps Weekly Navigation Channel Condition Status Report. It's critical to maintaining a common operating picture and mitigating the impacts of low water. In this report, the Corps publishes weekly current and forecast water conditions, area where dredges are working, special instructions for transiting specific river reaches, implementation of the U.S. Coast Guard Waterway Action Plan, and navigation instructions where buoys are missing. The key input to this report was the feedback of the team. The Corps, Coast Guard, and River Industry Action Committee along with mariners on the river, consistently improve the quality and availability of the data via GIS websites, etc. Those were other lessons learned from 2012 and applied, getting more real-time data to users faster so they can make better decisions. The team held calls twice weekly and instantly brought up issues so that they could be addressed before they became problematic. The information presented enabled users to make good business decisions and maximize what could be safely shipped given the current forecasted conditions. This is critical as every 1 foot in a barge loading depth translates to 6,000 bushels of grain. These reports were invaluable and portrayed an accurate picture of the actions and strategy in dealing with the low water to stakeholders, the media, and VIPs. Visitors to the site, which included the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, the Commanding General and Deputy Commanding General of the United States Corps of Engineers, and river industry executives, along with federal agencies. One of the lessons learned from this event is the Corps needs to continue to improve the quality, availability, and speed of delivery of data to continue to enable industry to maximize their output during drought conditions. Bottom line for this year was the team, through communication, collaboration, and cooperation, was able to minimize the impacts to the economy during drought conditions on the Middle Mississippi River.
Okay, Cheryl, MoDOT continues to be a leader with helping solve supply chain disruptions. Your office led the Missouri Governor Supply Chain Task Force, and you're also responsible for leading the commercial navigation team. We understand this effort is always trying to identify ways to look forward and determine what can be done to strengthen the resiliency of the river for navigation. What can you tell our audience about these efforts?
You know, one of the things that when we talk to freight stakeholders, like businesses that own the freight and the carriers, what they're looking for is reliable. It makes a huge difference to them whether they can use, I'm going to use a roadway, for instance. Is it going to take me 2 hours every day to make this trip, or is it going to be 2 minutes or 35 minutes today and 5 hours tomorrow? We've got to plan accordingly. The river is the same way. The river, folks use the river and the commerce, and it is like the greenest and one of the least expensive methods of transporting our freight, which is what gives us an advantage in those international markets with our ag products, especially. How do we do that? By being able to be reliable, because if it's not a reliable form of transportation or resilient that we say, ooh, that's not working here, we got a backup plan, they can miss their contract deadline, and that impacts them for years to come. So the supply chain task force that we worked on last year looked at those issues as well. It said there were all these supply chain disruptions that everyone saw in the media and the news on the coast. We saw the 100 ships parked off of LA trying to just unload our products and empty store shelves. Governor Supply Chain said, what can we do to make that better, not only now, but in the future? What are some investments we can make? And they saw, Mary was a member of that supply chain task force with us. A couple of the recommendations that came out looked at the waterways and said, we need to make sure our locks and dams are working well and we're investing appropriately. We need to make sure that our navigators have ways, the channel is there when we need it and how we need it. So some of the things that we saw looking at here is commercial navigation impact team, when we pulled them together and said, Lou's team and the weather service provided us these great forecasts so folks could plan in the future and plan what they needed to do and figure out how that worked. Then we looked at, okay, now if we're getting more people on the river, what is it we can do? How can we, and we moved into that next phase of what can we do looking long-term, not just planning when the disaster hits. What can we do now to look forward and lessons learned for the next few years?
Thank you, Cheryl. Shane, looking to the future, I was hoping you could talk about the Lower Missouri River Study concept and how it ties to flow in the Mid-Mississippi River.
Absolutely. So currently there are 2 ongoing studies on the Missouri River, and these are multi-state studies, a flood resiliency study and a navigation resiliency study. These 2 will eventually tie together as those issues are clearly interrelated on one river system, and both are really important. I will say today I'm going to focus mostly on the navigation study. And again, this is a multi-state study and it's a federal cost share study. The Port of Kansas City is the official non-federal partner, and we're working with them as well as partners such as MoDOT and the state of Missouri to secure additional funds to keep this study moving forward. And the study is significant because what it does is it gives us an official process to examine the current state of the navigation on the river, as well as look at some of the original design assumptions and look at new ideas to increase the reliability of resiliency on the river. And so that includes looking at things such as the bank stabilization and navigation program system of dikes and revetments, seeing, is the engineering correct on those? Do we need to make changes to those? Looking at flow targets out of the reservoirs, and do we need to change those? What do those look like? It also looks at even much bigger picture things like looking at our tributaries and considering are there additional reservoirs we could put in place? Are there other changes we need to make? Is there new technology out there from a container on barge and things like that we can look at to increase resiliency and reliability of the river? And so just a really big picture study. And ultimately at the end of it, we will have a chief's report that we can take to Congress and actually get real authorizations of actual projects that are agreed upon that will improve the system. And so a new start study like this is rare, and it's a really important opportunity that we must really execute well, because it's key to have this kind of more official process to address many of the challenges that we've been working on the Missouri River for really decades. And this is a really kind of a moment in time, partnered with the investment that we already have in the river with the infrastructure bill to make a huge impact. And so this already occurring momentum we have paired with this it's just really exciting about what we might be able to accomplish to get more to that reliability and resiliency that we're achieving. And that's going to have an impact not only on the Missouri River, but also as we see more moving, more reliability, more shipping on the Missouri, that's going to have an impact on the Mississippi. It's there's no border at the Missouri or Mississippi River. That water continues to flow, and what's happening on the Missouri absolutely impacts the Mississippi, specifically the middle Mississippi.
Shane, great response. We appreciate that update. Chris, I was hoping you could give us an update on the Ag Impact Team, focusing on the aspect of what the ag community does when water isn't available for transportation.
Well, the farmers really rely on a transportation system to get grain moved in the fall. And when we have problems, it becomes a huge logistics nightmare, especially this last year. It wasn't as easy to just move from river to rail or rail to truck. We had a pending rail strike being discussed. So who wants to deal with that? Obviously, truck drivers are not plentiful. So you can't just immediately overnight decide, well, I'm not going to load barges, I'm going to move it all to a truck. That becomes a big nightmare, and it's a costly issue. Farmers are probably the only industry that they're price takers. So they have to really rely upon the system to be as equitable, and they need competition amongst the different modes to drive down the cost of transportation, because that improves their bottom line. And the other thing with farming and agriculture is it's somewhat a seasonal item. You've got a certain window of time every year to get this product, whether it's moving fertilizer upriver, you need that up in a timely manner. And the other thing I think is important to realize is that river system, as it's moving these products, whether up or down, plays a big role in just the whole storage of the product. And fertilizer especially needs to be all used probably in a narrow window in the spring of the year sometimes. So getting barges upriver is very critical. And it's not as easy just to convert all that to trucks. It's not that easy to move it. You can't get it where you need it all the time. So having a reliable river system is critical to the to Missouri farmer.
Thank you, Chris. Cheryl, for your closing, please tell our audience how the work you're doing will benefit the industry.
The industry can benefit from the collaborative efforts that we're doing with these federal agencies, state agencies, groups such as Coalition for the Missouri River, and by looking at those root causes of issues. So some of the things we've looked at and found is that, we have day boards on the river, that there is an ongoing question. And so MoDOT has been sharing our practices for taking care of the right away next to the roads. How do we do the vegetation there? And the Coast Guard's looking to that for best practices. We're working collaboratively to try and solve that proactively so that as the freight increases, which we all know it will, and we hope it comes onto the waterways because it makes a much more generous economy for the state of Missouri, that we can solve those problems or start on a good path to proactive. And so the communication we have going amongst this group and the problem solving collaboration of how do we get to the bottom of this and what can we do to move forward, I think will benefit the industry overall.
Okay. Lou, what have we not touched on that you want our audience to know?
I think the three things, just to recap, are one, the advanced measures. Using lessons learned from previous years enabled us to address the issue of drought efficiently and maintain the channel. Two, our hardworking dredge crews, 53-person crews working around the clock in the heat of summer and the harshness of winter, where it did get down to minus 25 wind chill. You can't say enough about the crew and their ability to maintain an aging fleet. And then finally, the common operating procedure and everybody who provided inputs to it. You know, together we work as a team. We got a product out that was trustworthy, reliable, and allowed people to plan effectively given the conditions that were expected.
Thank you, Lou. Shane, in discussing the study, you referenced both the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers. In your closing comments, can you help our audience to better understand the interrelationship between those two bodies of water?
Yes, so a significant portion of the middle Mississippi, specifically the flows, come from the Missouri River. And so as we talk about drought and low water times, that's even more significant and impactful. In fact, you know, there's times, I'd say, especially even this year, where in those low runoff scenarios that the Missouri contributes as much as 80% of the flow of the middle Mississippi. So as we talk about keeping traffic and freight moving on the Missouri, and how that relates to the Mississippi, it's absolutely critical to understand the relationship between the two. And so it's important to note that the Missouri River cannot be managed from an authority standpoint to support the Mississippi. However, with a healthy economy on the Missouri River, it absolutely has a direct impact to the Mississippi and the flows throughout the season. And so when there's freight and there's barges moving on the Missouri River, there's a direct impact to the flows on the Missouri River, which means obviously a direct impact to the Mississippi. And so again, the Missouri is not managed to support flows to the Mississippi directly, but we absolutely, if we have an interest in the Mississippi River and moving freight there, we want there to be business on the Missouri River as well, because that's where that management decisions come in and impacts those businesses on the river. And so those operating on the Mississippi River should care about the Missouri because of that. And when business is good on the Missouri River, that means business is going to be good on the Mississippi as well. And so if boats are not moving on the Missouri River, that means less water into the Mississippi River potentially. And so just in addition to that increased resiliency, I think also those doing business on the Mississippi should take a serious look at the opportunity on the Missouri, because as mentioned today, the investments happening in it, that channel is becoming more reliable, even in low flows. Those structures are starting to operate the way they're supposed to, and we're seeing that resiliency really start operating as it should. And so we think that's exciting, and that relationship's important.
Thank you, Shane. Chris, any final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that our farmers are going to continue to adopt new technologies, which is going to continue to make us allow us to grow more and more volumes of grain. And exports are critical to the profitability of our farmers. And so we're going to be demanding and needing more transportation of all modes. And when I look at, you know, what mode is somewhat underutilized, I'd say there's room for growth on the river. And so we're excited about that. I'd echo what Shane was saying about some companies that are making investments on the Missouri River and opportunities for our farmers to move more products in both directions on the river. So, you know, I think the navigation industry should be excited about that, because our waterways give us a strategic advantage, and we need to leverage that. And it is critical to making our farmers profitable. And we really appreciate everything that our partners on this webinar do for us to be able to leverage that and to take advantage of the opportunities the river presents. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to all of our panelists. Today's discussion has been very helpful. I think the biggest takeaway is that this initiative you all are working on is a true collaboration and partnership that will go a long way towards strengthening the resiliency of the rivers for navigation. We're pleased to be able to highlight your work and the benefits it will yield for the shipping industry. So thank you for sharing it with us. I'd also like to give a final thank you to our sponsors for FreightWeekSTL 2023. Their support makes it possible for us to continue to deliver the great content that is a hallmark of this annual conference. Freight Week wraps up tomorrow with the release of our latest industrial market real estate report and our final session, a 70 on 70 spotlight. Those tuning in will hear firsthand from the researchers taking a closer look at this vital link between Illinois and Missouri, a 70-mile corridor that is the epicenter of the historic surge and new construction in the St. Louis regional industrial market. We hope you can join us and encourage you to share links to any of our Freight Week content with others who may be interested.